Hey everyone, Tankenstein here. In this video, I'll be reviewing the M1A1 HC Click-Bait. This is a currently Tier 7 battle rating 11.3 medium/main battle tank in the American Ground Forces tech trait. This vehicle currently comes in a pack that includes 2,500 Golden Eagles, 20 days of premium time, and of course the Click-Bait, and costs $69.99 USD. That said, in this video, I'll be going over everything that you need to know about this premium Abrams variant, including its stats, how it plays, I'll go over its strengths and weaknesses, I'll give it some scores in several key areas, and then I'll give my final recommendation on if I feel that this vehicle is worth purchasing or not. With that said, if you like this kind of video, please consider subscribing, but without further ado, let's get into it. Now to start, I'll place a stat card here on the side of the screen. Important things to note are its power to weight ratio, its turret traverse speed, and its reload rate. Now for how it plays. The HC Click-Bait is essentially just an M1A1 HC, but the premium edition with some visual modifications, including a fancy lawn chair on top of the turret. Functionally, there is no difference between this vehicle and the M1A1 HC in the regular tech trait. Because of this, Click-Bait is a fast-moving MBT with good turret armor, a strong cannon, and good reload rate, which makes this a good vehicle when on offense. With Click-Bait, you will be able to flank, base cap, snipe, and even frontline, though frontlining should be done from behind cover whenever possible due to some major weak spots on the front and sides of this vehicle, namely under the cannon breach as well as the turret ring in general. With this said, this vehicle functions more or less as an MBT should at this BR, being good at most roles, though suffering in a few. Due to those frontal weak spots, I would avoid using Click-Bait as a brawler, instead staying a little bit further away from direct frontline duty. Further, when sniping, it may be difficult at substantial ranges, namely over 1.5 kilometers, due to having Gen 1 thermals, which will make enemies at those ranges potentially blurry and not easy to pick out from the background. Additionally, you don't have commander sights as well, so you cannot rely on those. Regardless, due to the excellent M1A1 APF SDS with nearly 600mm of armor pen at max, as well as around a 25 horsepower per ton power to weight ratio, you will be able to get to the areas that you want, be they sniping spots, capping points, or even at the front line, again just slightly away from direct brawling lengths, and will allow you to be able to pen anyone that gets in your way with a simple click. The M1A1 is one of the better APF SDS in War Thunder and should allow you to kill anyone on the enemy team with ease. Additionally, this vehicle does have access to the M830A1 Heat FS shell, which is able to airburst and thus can make destroying aircraft a bit easier. Now on a side note, Click-Bait along with a standard tech tree HC somewhat benefits from its electro-optical APS on the turret, which should be able to jam some ATGMs, at least those with older technology. Now because of all of these things, this vehicle very well exemplifies the idea of the MBT, but again, you'll want to make sure that you protect that large weak spot under the barrel. If you can do this, you're good to play Click-Bait essentially however you want. Now with that said, let's get into its strengths and weaknesses. And first for its strengths. Click-Bait has access to the excellent M829A1 APF SDS shell with nearly 600mm of armor pen at max. Second, it has a great turret traverse rate that can be as high as 40 degrees per second. For its third strength, it has a good reload rate that can be as low as 6 seconds. Fourth, it has very good frontal turret armor with over 800mm of composite armor, and even pretty decent turret armor on the sides with give or take around 300mm as well. For its fifth strength, it has surprisingly good lower glacis armor. Sixth, it has a top-mounted HMG and an LMG for taking out aircraft and lightly armored enemies. Seventh, it has an APS that will help to stop some ATGMs from hitting their target. For its 8th strength, this can fire the airburst M830A1 Heat FS shell that of course can kill aircraft and if you so choose some lightly armored vehicles. For its 9th strength, this features a surprisingly good power to weight ratio, give or take around 25 horsepower per ton, that gives Click-Bait very good mobility. For its 10th strength, this carries more smoke grenades than other Abrams variants and also has access to ESS. For its 11th strength, this features blowout panels to save from ammo rack deaths. For its 12th strength, there are many strengths here. It has a great vertical guidance of between -10 and +20 degrees. And finally, we have premium RP and SL bonuses. Now for its weaknesses. While at least it has thermals, they are only Gen 1, which can make enemies at range difficult to spot. For its second weakness, while the APS on top of the turret can be useful in some situations, I mostly just shut it off, as it is essentially a massive flashlight that can be seen in night vision. For its third weakness, it has poor upper glacis armor and acts as one of the bigger weak spots on this vehicle. For its fourth weakness, with the exception of highly angled HFS shells, the side armor will likely stop nothing. For its fifth weakness, this vehicle lacks a commander sight, which may be disappointing for a lot of players. Sixth, it has a large engine deck lid that will make aiming over the engine very difficult, making it nearly impossible to hit many enemies directly behind you. It isn't as severe as other tanks such as the Leopard 2 and doubly so for the Challenger 2, but it's still pretty bad. And then finally, it has a huge weak spot underneath the cannon, but also along the turret ring in general. Now with that said, let's get into how I score this vehicle. And first, for armament, I give this a 7.25 out of 10. The armament on Click-Bait is fantastic. Between its 120mm cannon, good reload rate, and excellent armor pen, the Click-Bait should be able to handle any foe, be it in an up tier or a down tier. I can tell you from experience, as the HC is my favorite Abrams variant, that Click-Bait will have no issues in killing most enemies, especially if you know their weak spots. Further, it comes equipped with an HMG and an LMG on top, which will both help to defeat aircraft and lightly armored vehicles. Not only that, but the M830A1 HFS shell will also help in that endeavor. Oh, and don't forget that the M829A1 APF SDS shell weighs more and does somewhat more post-pen damage when compared to the KEW APF SDS on the M1A1 AIM, making this arguably the deadlier of the two. Now for mobility, I give it a 6.5 out of 10. While this isn't as quick as lower BR Abrams variants, namely the M1 KVT, the Click-Bait still has a nearly 25 horsepower per ton power to weight ratio and a great suspension that allows it to move around any given map in War Thunder about as quickly as anyone else. The mobility on this vehicle is pretty much good enough for you to be able to play however you'd like to do, and that's all you can really ask for. For survivability, I give it a 5 out of 10. While the HC has substantially improved turret armor compared to earlier Abrams variants, with over 800mm of composite armor on the turret front and over 300mm on the sides, it has to face absolute beasts at this BR that have a relatively high chance of penning you. That, combined with relatively large weak spots, makes the HC a somewhat easy kill to players that essentially catch you with your pants down. But otherwise, very few people will be able to pen you on the turret front, and even the lower glacis is fairly well armored. Further, blowout panels, extra smoke grenades, and some composite side skirts help to improve this score somewhat. While Click-Bait is not perfect, it can survive quite decently, especially against players that do not know its weak spots. So some disclosure here, I've revised this score 3 times over several days of continual play with Click-Bait, and each time it has decreased. It can survive shots to the turret, but I almost kind of feel like I'm still rating this a little bit highly at 5 out of 10. And the Challenger 2 OES, a touch low in this category. If you guys want, I do have a review on that, as I gave it just below a 5 out of 10 for survivability. Perhaps these scores should be switched between the HC Click-Bait and the OES. One other big problem when it comes to survivability for Click-Bait is that Abrams are incredibly common, thus people are much more likely to know their weak spots, which are pretty sizable, versus a similar BR tank like the Challenger 2 OES. So even while this does have possibly comparatively better armor in some ways compared to, again, the OES or other vehicles at and around this BR, it's so common that people know exactly where to shoot in order to kill it. Now for its score overall, I give it a 6.25 out of 10. Perhaps I'm being a bit generous in my scoring, again, in terms of survivability especially, or perhaps not, but Click-Bait and by extension the M1A1 HC in general is a great blend of firepower, mobility, and relatively decent armor that will benefit players that can position themselves well enough to not constantly expose their weak spots. If you can manage this, Click-Bait will become an asset for you at top tier, with it sitting among the most powerful premium vehicles in War Thunder. Now with all this being said, do I recommend the M1A1 HC Click-Bait? Yes, but really only for experienced players and more so for those who have disposable income. All of the things I mentioned before, from the strengths and weaknesses through my scoring for this vehicle, are through the eyes of someone who has grinded through literally numerous ground tech trees and also some air tech trees in their entirety with somewhat minimal premium vehicle support. Top tier is absolute chaos incarnate for ground vehicles, and as such, should be avoided by inexperienced players, regardless of how good the vehicle is that you're driving. Click-Bait has a great mix of traits that will allow it to be extremely successful in a skilled player's hands, but no amount of hand-holding will stop a noob from being a noob with this vehicle. Click-Bait is a costly $70 way to get frustrated at War Thunder if you have little experience outside of low-tier matches. If this describes you, then I would recommend to stay away from Click-Bait at least until you get closer to top tier. If you are experienced, I both recommend this vehicle and give it my Tankenstein seal of approval. It's likely the best mix of traits for a given BR for any M1A1 or higher Abrams in War Thunder. Even though this is an excellent vehicle, you do have to remember that it will be in constant, or at least near constant up tiers due to its proximity to top BR, which really should make anyone wary who purchases this thing. That really needs to be a disclaimer. This thing will be in constant up tiers with vehicles that are essentially better than you. I mean, 11.7 BR vehicles, for the most part, are pretty much better than all 11.3 BR vehicles, which is where this currently sits. It's just important, really, with this vehicle and any of the tier 7 premiums, especially, to understand what you're getting into before you actually get into it. But disclaimer aside, if we start seeing more accurate survivability features being added to this vehicle that do exist in real life, like what I've heard to be spall liners, then Click-Bait will only get better from here, and at that point it might be slightly more noob friendly, but still I only recommend this in really any of the higher tier premiums to experienced players. But with that being said, thank you all so much for watching. If you don't mind, please consider liking, commenting, and subscribing, as they are all tremendously helpful for me, and will also of course allow you to see my future videos more easily. But either way, thanks again. I'll see you all on the other side. Take care, everyone.